Welcome to the Cheltenham Borough Council Planning Committee, being held on Thursday, the 17th of April, 2025. My name is Councillor Garth Barnes, and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council's YouTube channel, and the recording of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. If you are here to make a representation to the meeting, you are consenting to the use of the sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware the CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery, and the recordings will be held by the council for 5 months. Please note, a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does go, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exit. Thank you. Before we start formally, can I just welcome Councillor Steve Steinhardt to the Planning Committee on his first occasion. Thank you very much indeed for taking over the role of the previous incumbent, Andy Mutton. I hope you enjoy the process. We've received apologies from Councillor Foster, and I believe that's the only apology we've got to have. Now we come to item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Allen.
I have an interest in the folly, so item 6C, and I'm pretty predetermined on the application, so I will be speaking in my capacity as ward councillor rather than as a member of the planning committee.
Thank you. I also have to declare an interest on that same item, 6C, the folly, on the basis that I am a trustee of the animal shelter at the end of the folly, and I will be taking no part in the debate, and I will leave the meeting once I have handed over to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Baker, and he will take the rest of the meeting, and I will not be returning. So thank you very much indeed for that. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Declarations of independent site visits.
Thanks, Chair. 6C, the folly.
Thank you very much indeed.
Like yourself, I'm a frequent visitor to the animal shelter, though I'm not a shareholder in that. Thank you. So I have been down, I have seen it all.
Okay, item 4, the minutes of the last meeting. I hope you all had a chance to read them. Are you happy that they're a true record, that I can sign them as such? Yes, agreed. Okay. There are no public questions, so we'll move on to item 6. And the first application that we have in front of us is item 6A, 71 Leckhampton Road, which is a tree issue. So I would like Sam Reader to introduce it for us, please, the tree officer.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a tree in the conservation area. So this is a proposal to remove a stone pine to the rear of 71 Leckhampton Road. Those of you who were part of this committee 3 years ago may remember that we had a similar proposal at this address to remove 2 trees there, 2 stone pines. The reason that this has been brought to committee is that the applicant is an employee of our housing division. My recommendation is to issue a decision notice of no objections. 3 years ago, this came to committee with 2 stone pines to be removed, and committee decided to issue no objections. The trees were not removed, they were both retained. The applicant has now decided to remove the tree, which is causing more of a nuisance to the neighbours, and to retain one of the trees. So there are 2 stone pines back there, as I've said. The red dot is the tree slightly to the northwest. Hangs over the boundary edge, most prominently to the rear garden of 14 Station Close. As I say, we've determined a previous proposal at this address to remove both stone pines. Since then, the trees have not grown substantially. They're not, in the last 3 years, they haven't tripled in size. You can't see them really over the backs of the houses. National and local policy has remained the same in that time period with regards to trees. Apologies, that says removal of these 2 pines. It would actually only be the more northerly of the pines. That's the view of that tree from the road. It's not really visible. It's kind of partially visible at best. They don't tend to be towering tall trees in this country. It's unlikely that they'd ever be properly visible above the height of those houses. So these trees are early mature, roughly 6 meters tall, combined spread of roughly 8 meters. So we'd be losing a tree with a spread of roughly 4 meters. They are growing about 20 centimeters a year. They're good trees. They're in good condition. They're growing well. And I think in any other setting, if they were more visible, we'd be looking to protect them. We have to look at the issue of amenity and whether they do actually offer enough amenity locally in order to justify a tree preservation order, and that would be our only way of retaining that tree. We can't refuse a conservation area tree works notice. We have to issue a tree preservation order. Oh, and to follow what the slide actually says, sorry. Occasionally in these situations, we'd look for a reduction of the tree, a crown reduction, rather than a removal, as a sort of a middle ground between, no objections and a tree preservation order. We'd negotiate, some other way of managing the tree. Pine generally doesn't lend itself to crown reduction. Mostly the foliage is very tip heavy. You don't tend to get much internal growth. So, a meaningful reduction of those trees is not really possible, I don't think. That's a photo of the tree. So it's the tree on the right as you look at it there, to be removed. There is a nice little birch in the middle of them as well. Okay, so as I say, the options are a tree preservation order, or we respond with no objections, or we could let the 6 weeks period lapse, and then the assumption is that we have no objections to the tree works and the tree can be removed. Okay, so for a TPO, we would usually expect a tree to have at least 10 years of safe or useful life ahead of it. It should have public amenity value. It should be in good condition, and it should be under threat. Now, this tree ticks 3 of those boxes as far as I can see. I don't think it has excellent public amenity value simply because it's not very visible. It definitely has kind of lateral amenity value. It will be a habitat for some insects and birds and all the rest of it. Given that we have already as a council issued no objections to both trees being removed 3 years ago, I think it would be unreasonable at this point to try and protect this tree with a TPO. There's the relevant policy, local policy. And that's the end, I think.
Thank you very much indeed. So open it. There's no public speakers. So do we have any questions from members? to the tree officer? No. Move on to debate if there is any. Any member wishes to debate? No. I don't think you've anything to sum up, Sam, so we'll go to the voting system then that we've used before. So you have, this is, the recommendation is no objections, so all those for please indicate, or against. We should have 10 members, yes, good. So all votes have been cast and it is unanimous for no objections. So that is approved. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, everyone.
Just wait a moment while the next officer is preparing for the next application. Thank you very much. We have the senior planning officer to introduce the case. Michelle Payne, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks planning permission to replace the existing damaged white fascia and cladding to the front of a residential property. It's proposed to replace it with vertical black UPVC cladding and to extend the cladding across a portion of the ground floor. The application is here because the applicant's partner is a elected Cheltenham Borough councillor. So the site's located on the south side of Bafford Approach within Charlton Kings Parish and comprises a two-storey semi-detached property. So as existing, the property is largely faced in brick with sections of white horizontal wood and UPVC cladding and white rainwater goods. And then the existing white cladding would be replaced with black vertical UPVC and black rainwater goods. And the new cladding, as I said before, would extend across as shown on the drawing. So these are just some Google Street View images of neighbouring properties that have been previously altered. And you've got the application site up on the top left. So the key planning consideration relates to design and the impact on the street scene. And in this regard, officers are satisfied that whilst the appearance of the property would undoubtedly be altered within the street scene, it would not appear particularly out of keeping or at odds with its context. And the recommendation, therefore, is to grant planning permission.
Thank you, Michelle. We have no public speakers again, so any questions from members to the officer? No. So we go to member debate. Any member wishes to comment? No. Thank you very much indeed. Nothing for you to come back to, Michelle. In that case, we go to the vote. The recommendation is to permit. So all those please show either for, against or. So is everybody voted? And that is unanimously in favour of permit. So thank you very much indeed. That completes that section. We are now moving on to the third item, and I will be vacating the chair to Councillor Baker, and I will leave the room, as is the other member as well. So, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so my name is Councillor Paul Baker. I am the Vice Chairman of the committee and I will chair the remainder of the meeting. So we now move on to item 6C, the folly. I'd like to ask Michelle Payne to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application seeks full planning permission for a new residential development comprising the erection of 122 low carbon dwellings, along with associated access, infrastructure, landscaping, open space and a car park. The applicant, Astor Homes Limited, are proposing a mixed tenure affordable scheme comprising shared ownership homes and homes for social rent. The application is before Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Clucas. So the site comprises a single field located to the north of Swindon Road at the junction with Gardeners Lane and sits within the principal area and covers an area of approximately 6 hectares. The site also includes a derelict pavilion and changing building with associated car park. The site's enclosed along the street frontages by palisade fencing with a number of mature trees and hedges along the site boundaries. So the site is currently owned by the University of Gloucestershire and was formerly used for sports provision for the university. However, as a result of the university's ongoing investment in its sports-related courses, its sports provision is now focused at its Oxtals campus, Oxtals Sports Park and the Park campus. The site is not publicly accessible. So the site is bound by residential properties in Stanwick Gardens to the west, with residential properties opposite the site on Swindon Road, with additional residential properties in Thomond Close and Windridge Gardens to the north, together with Cheltenham Animal Shelter, and then Gardeners Lane Primary School and Early Years Centre located to the east. So that plan just seeks to show the adjacent land uses. And then we've got some photos of the site. So they're all labelled. I'll just flick through these for you. So there we've got the northern end of Gardeners Lane and then looking back south. And then these are just a view from Gardeners Lane, Swindon Road junction. So this is just to show the site context. So we've got the Gardeners Lane Primary School building on the left, and then some surrounding housing styles on the right, the majority of which are 2 stories. So vehicular access to the site would be provided via a single access point on Swindon Road, with a network of pedestrian footways and cycleways providing links through the site to and from neighbouring developments. Off-site pedestrian improvements comprising 11 number crossings are also proposed. The dwellings would be located on the northern part of the site, with a new area of public green space retained to the south, fronting Swindon Road. So the dwellings are largely 2 stories, and the scale of the dwellings is considered wholly appropriate in this context and generally consistent with nearby developments. And each property would benefit from a minimum of 1 car parking space. A car park for use by the adjacent school would be accessed via the existing access on Gardeners Lane. And as set out in the officer report, as originally submitted, the application proposed a play and pitch on the southern part of the site for children's and youth sport provision, together with a pavilion and car parking. However, the scheme was objected to by Sport England. As a consequence, the scheme has been amended to omit the sports provision from the proposal, but to include the new area of public open space. A package of sports mitigation in the form of a community use agreement for facilities at the park campus is also proposed, and Sport England maintain their objection. And then we've just got the various floor plans and elevations. And these are the 1-bed, 2-person masonettes. Across the site, the buildings are relatively traditional in form, with dark grey pitch-tarred roofs and a fairly simple palette of basic materials, including pink, pastel multi-brick, buff brick and dark grey brick, together with a dark grey brown brick to provide detail across all house types. Additional interest to the street scene and facades would be provided by varying coursing patterns in the brickwork and render panels. It is regrettable that solar PV technology is not proposed at this time. However, whilst this is something that has been fully considered by the applicant, the sustainability and energy strategy has sought to adopt a robust approach to fabric first and the use of air source heat pumps to achieve a 61% carbon reduction when benchmarked against building regulations. And keeping the buildings efficient is considered to be the most cost-effective route to benefit future residents, particularly given that the scheme will be delivered as 100% affordable housing. That said, the roofs have all been designed to enable the installation of solar panels in the future. So I'll just click through. So there's a variety of housing types across the site. So this is the bungalow. And then we've got varying sizes of houses. Picture. And then we've got some illustrative views that have been provided by the applicant, just to give a feel for the space that would be provided. And then high quality landscaping is proposed throughout the site to include significant green landscape buffers, which would help to soften the development and would allow for the retention of many of the existing mature trees. Although the proposal would result in the loss of 5 of the existing trees, which are now TPO'd, 190 new trees would be planted as part of the wider landscaping scheme. And all parking bays and details to junctions and courtyards would be block paved. So the key planning matters relevant in the consideration of this application are the principle of development, both in terms of the proposed residential use and the loss of the existing play and pitch and green space, design and layout, sustainability and climate change, historic environment, access parking and highway impacts, any impact on the amenity of adjoining land users, drainage and flooding, trees and landscaping, ecology and biodiversity net gain, and Section 106 obligations. So just in summary of the officer recommendation, where the policies that are most important for determining an application are out of date, as is currently the case in Cheltenham, paragraph 11D of the NPPF requires permission to be granted, unless the application of policies in the NPPF that protect areas or assets of particular importance, provide strong reason for refusing the development, or any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Paragraph 11D was explicitly updated in the most recent revision to the NPPF to direct developments to sustainable locations and ensure the provision of affordable homes. The application site, whilst not allocated for housing, is sustainably located within the principal urban area in a predominantly residential area, and the proposal would result in the provision of 122 new affordable homes that would make a valuable contribution to the borough's housing stock, and this matter carries significant weight. It's acknowledged that the development would result in the loss of the existing playing pitch and is objected to by Sport England, but on balance, officers do not consider that the loss of the playing pitch nor any other adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits associated with the provision of new homes. Overall, officers are therefore satisfied that in taking into account all of the economic, social and environmental aspects of the application and paragraph 11D of the NPPF, the proposed development is one that should be supported. There are no strong reasons for refusing the development. The recommendation, therefore, is to grant planning permission subject to the schedule of conditions set out in the update to the officer report and signed Section 106 legal agreement. As set out in the main officer report, the Section 106 request from the County Council in relation to Junction 10 improvement works is not being sought, as whilst the challenge of funding the works is understood, insufficient evidence has been provided by the County Council to date to demonstrate that the impact of the development would be severe in the event that the Junction 10 works were not forthcoming. And so then we've got the schedule of conditions, which is a relatively standard schedule of conditions for a development of this scale and nature. And the conditions are set out in full in the update to the officer report. And the obligations that would be secured by the Section 106 agreement would include 40% affordable housing, education and library contributions, public open space, BNG, SAC mitigation and the travel plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. So we now move on to speakers. We have 5 public speakers, an objector, the applicant's representative, 2 borough councillors, who I believe are speaking against the application, and 1 county councillor who also I believe is speaking against the application. In the light of the balance of speakers, I'm very happy to allow the 1 speaker in support of the application more than 5 minutes if he needs to, given that we're going to have 5, 10, 15, up to 20 minutes for those against it. So you can either speak slower or speak a bit longer. So the first speaker I'd like to call then is Richard Lawler. Richard, all speakers, you have up to 5 minutes. And Michael will be doing the timing. I am going to stick to the time because of the number of speakers we have, and you'll get a little warning with 30 seconds to go that your time is coming to an end. So when you're ready, Richard, off you go.
Chair, members of the committee, I object to this application on multiple grounds, but I wish to focus tonight on fundamental flaws in the officer's recommendation, particularly around the protection of playing fields, misuse of planning policy, and the long-term consequences for Cheltenham's planning integrity. 1. Playing fields are protected by national policy, and this site fails the tests. Sport England, a statutory consultee, has objected. Paragraph 104 of the NPPF makes clear playing fields must not be built on unless they are surplus to requirements, replaced with equivalent or better provision, or substituted by a facility of greater benefit. None of these tests are met, and the government's planning framework doesn't allow exceptions. 2. This was not disused land, it was strategically abandoned. This was a marked multi-pitch site for football and mini soccer. In recent years, it was used for both youth football, rugby league and other sports, while under exactly the same ownership and management as now. The gate may be locked today, but that reflects a deliberate choice to restrict access, not a lack of demand. This is a textbook managed decline, and under national policy, both public and private fields are protected from exactly this kind of engineered loss. 3. The titled balance does not apply because protective policies are engaged. The officer leans on the titled balance due to the housing shortfall, but paragraph 11D1 of the NPPF states clearly, permission should be refused where the application of policies in the framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusal. Paragraph 104 is one such policy. Sport England says this fails the test. Therefore, paragraph 11D1 is triggered. The titled balance does not apply and cannot lawfully override this protection. 4. Parks are not pitches, and the park is already in use. The proposed community park cannot substitute for bookable formal playing pitches. That is a completely different category of provision on quantity, quality and functionality. More importantly, the park, the location put forward as mitigation, is already in regular use by Leckhampton Rovers and others as a playing pitch and training ground. It's not new and it's not spare capacity. Rebadging existing heavily used green space as mitigation for the loss of a dedicated playing field, especially in one of the least affluent parts of town, is misleading and inequitable. 5. Cheltenham's own 2024 playing pitch strategy demands protection of the folly. This is critical. The brand new playing pitch strategy, unanimously adopted by Cabinet in July 2024, was produced by professional sports consultants. It clearly states the folly previously provided 3 adult pitches and a mini soccer pitch. Proposals submitted to develop housing on this site, if these proceed, ensure any loss of pitch provision is mitigated and that mitigation is signed off by all relevant NGBs and Sport England. It also says explicitly, disused sites and unmarked pitches shouldn't be deemed surplus to requirements unless one of Sports England's policy exceptions can be met. It further notes that the site remains perfectly usable for multiple community sports. No mitigation has been agreed. The evidence base adopted by this very council supports refusal. A year ago, the university was engaged to consider mitigation, perhaps by contributing to new provision at Swindon Road or West Cheltenham. They declined both options. That was their choice. 6. This site is not a strategic allocation. It undermines plan-led development. This site was not allocated for housing in the Cheltenham Plan. It came forward through the private sale. Allowing it now encourages speculative development, erodes trust in the plan-led system, while placing additional unplanned strain on local infrastructure. In conclusion, this application fails the NPPF paragraph 104, triggers paragraph 11D1, removing the title balance, conflicts with Sports England's statutory objection, contradicts Cheltenham's adopted playing pitch strategy, and sets a dangerous precedent for the unplanned loss of protected sports land. If this committee approves the application, it must refer it to the Secretary of State. I urge you to reject it, or at the very least, defer and refer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ben Reid, who is the applicant's representative. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciated on the extension of time. I'm going to read a short statement I pre-prepared and then come back on one point raised by Mr. Lord, which I think is important to clarify. Members already have a comprehensive report from your officers recommending approval of this application, so I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes to highlight some key issues for your consideration. Committee members will be familiar with planning decisions are a matter of judgment, which weighs the benefits of development against the adverse impacts. Members will also be familiar with the NPPF threshold that adverse impacts have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits if planning permission is to be refused. So in this case, what are the adverse impacts of development? It is primarily a single-use issue relating to the perceived loss of a formal playing field. But it's worth remembering that this playing field, which has been disused for a number of years and has no public access. So in practice, there's no net loss of provision for sports, any sports in the borough as a result of this development. There are no other technical matters which would direct an impact to be material in determination. As set out in your officer report, objection from Sport England is a normal protocol for disused playing fields. The only other issues raised from Highways and Green Space consultee comments relate to financial obligations being sought, both of which in our firm view are not evidenced or necessary to make the proposal acceptable in planning terms. This position is also supported by your planning officers in their assessment. On the other side of the scales, what benefits do we have? Members will be familiar with the significant weight attached to the delivery of housing generally, especially at a time when the council is unable to demonstrate a mandatory 5-year housing land supply. But of course, this proposal isn't just about housing generally. It's an affordable housing-led proposal by a recognised housing provider and to be delivered by a local construction firm supporting local jobs. There were 2,593 households waiting on the council's housing register. That's 2,593 people, couples and families who do not currently have suitable accommodation. It will include a mix of social rented and shared ownership properties, providing the only realistic route to home ownership for many, given that house prices in the borough are currently 9 times median earnings. These homes will provide opportunity. They will prioritise local people, will also deliver a 5-bedroom home and a wheelchair-accessible bungalow responding to very specific needs of 2 families on the council's housing register. The role of this scheme will play in meeting housing needs locally is substantial and presents a major opportunity for this council to showcase that it's taking proactive decisions on housing following thorough engagement from its officers. It will also secure playing fields at the Park campus through community use agreement, providing a net increase in match equivalent sporting provision across the borough. This is a benefit of the proposal. It will deliver a 5-acre community park well in excess of what's required by a development of this scale, which we believe will provide a transformative enhancement for Swindon Road and significant benefit for the local community. It will deliver a new staff car park for Gardeners Lane Primary School, a benefit. It will deliver 14% biodiversity net gain and plant 190 new trees, a benefit. The homes will also be highly sustainable through their build quality, adopting a fabric-first approach and delivering homes which will be much more efficient than is required of them to the benefit of their future residents. They will provide a 61% carbon reduction when benchmarked against building regulations. So, Chair, it's plain, as your officers have concluded, that there are no adverse impacts arising from this proposal, which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the very substantial benefits that will be provided. And we respectfully request that you support your officer's recommendation. Just picking up on one point Mr. Lawler raised, he suggested that the tilted balance, which leans towards granting planning permission in this case, would be disengaged at paragraph 11D, which is incorrect as a matter of policy. I'd take you, which your officers will guide you to, footnote 7 of the NPPF sets out all of those exclusions that would disengage the tilted balance, and none of those apply in this case. So you are applying a tilted balance in your determination of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Flo Clucas, as the ward member. Flo, as you know, you have up to 5 minutes. I will give you a little nod at 4 minutes, 30 seconds.
Right, thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, it's interesting looking around the room. I'll come to that in a second. Rather than go through what's just been said at this moment in time, I'd like to draw your attention to the Council of Europe. And that might seem rather strange to bring to a planning committee, but the Council of Europe represents all European countries, all of them. They're based in Strasbourg, where the Council of Europe sits and works with countries across Europe to create legislation that each of them can sign up to. In relation to us, the United Kingdom, we signed up to legislation in 2009, and that was called the Florence Convention. Some of you may have heard of that. My guess is that most of you haven't. The Florence Convention acknowledges the role that landscapes play. In this case, not me, in this case, the folly. It plays a significant part in the lives of ordinary people, and not simply as a place to do things, but as a place to see, to have at the heart of the community, that everybody there knows, that everybody can appreciate, that gives people the opportunity to look at wildlife developing, as just one example, to look at how that particular location can be preserved for the benefit of its people. And the Florence Convention allows all of that, and indeed insists all of that is looked at when something like a planning application comes into being. It was something that we did through the Joint Core Strategy, and that was how we managed to save the local green space in Swindon Village, I think the largest in England. Had we known what was going to happen here, the folly, would have been part of that application too. Unfortunately, because the university has just decided to flog the land, this is what is happening now. So, what is landscape? Well, the Florence Convention defines it as an area perceived by local people as a place whose character is the result of the action and interaction of natural and human factors. Just think about that for a moment. It's defined as having many values, not all of them tangible. Perhaps most importantly, it's valued by and matters to local people and provides a context for people's lives. Landscape, according to the Florence Convention, is recognised as an essential part of a sustainable future and sustainable communities, and is essential to placemaking, community cohesion, quality of life, health, and well-being. Why is it important in this context? It's important because Swindon Village, the area between this location and Tewkesbury, will be the home to some 4,200 houses and flats, in addition to others that may be built that are not yet formally applied for in terms of planning applications. During the Joint Core Strategy discussions and decision-making, Swindon Village worked with CBC and developers to ensure that local valued green space was protected. And the Florence Convention, which I outlined to the planning inspector, played its part. One of the reasons why the folly wasn't included, as I have just said, is because it was believed by residents already to be protected. Just shows you, doesn't it? The university owns this land and has a responsibility to the local community, not just to itself and its treasury. 4,200 homes, that's an awful lot. It's actually 2 Cheltenham wards, to give you some idea of the size of development that's going to happen. It's huge. The university is a local source of education, but also has a social responsibility, and simply to profit from the sale of the land because you want the money is not adhering to that social responsibility. Money from sale doesn't mean that communities can be ignored or their views not counted. And let me move quickly to the situation in relation to the local roads, because the local roads are not able to take this level of traffic. That does not appear, as it should, in the report that you have. Accidents there have been, and a significant number. The corner house on Elm Street, Swindon Road, has been hit half a dozen times in the last, half a dozen times in the last couple of years.
Sorry, that
In
is time.
October-
That is time, I'm afraid. I did say at the beginning, I was going to be very strict on time.
Very well,
because
Chair,
the
if
number
I
of
might
speakers
just
we have.
conclude my remarks in that case. In October, a child going to school was knocked off her bike and the driver didn't stop. And in July last year, an elderly lady was seriously hurt when she was hit by a car speeding along that road. That's the sort of thing that happens there, and these roads cannot take that level of traffic.
Thank
And
you.
so I ask you to turn this down.
Thank you. I'd now like to call Councillor Frank Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors of the committee, we've heard great representation so far, providing many reasons to vote against this untenable development. To prepare a refusal, committee members will know that they must also provide justifications based in planning law and policy, and here are four. Firstly, the folly does not comply with paras 10 and 11DII of the NPPF. We are asked to favour sustainable development, particularly when we cannot meet our 5-year housing land supply, as is the case for CBC. With regards to highways, I will show you that this development is not sustainable development and that the adverse effects of this scheme significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits even when considered as a whole. The folly also fails to comply with paragraphs 115B and D, 116 and 117C of the NPPF as listed in the report. Then the scheme goes against our joint course strategy objectives to tackle the challenges of climate change, promote sustainable transport and promote healthy communities. Most importantly, the current proposals cannot be consented when we bear in mind GCS policies INF1 sections 1I, which calls for safe and efficient access to the highway network, and section 2, which notes planning permission will be granted only where the impact of development on the transport network is not considered to be severe. As GCC's representation shows, the folly's impact will be unacceptably damaging. Affordable housing is absolutely necessary, and I recognise the challenges of meeting our housing land supply, but it is unsustainable to build this without the necessary infrastructure around it, both in terms of transport infrastructure and community infrastructure. Consenting the folly development would create a poorly connected and therefore underserviced, unsafe and unhealthy neighbourhood. In particular, the pressure on traffic and the inadequacy of the current access scheme needs highlighting. GCC's representation is very clear that the traffic movements caused by the scheme, along with other developments in the area, will lead to unacceptable harm/impacts to the road network. Even then, the traffic we'll see could be double the Highways Authority's projection, as one resident has evidence in their representation. The assessments provided by the developer do not suffice either, and also underestimate the impact during the early weekdays. The more than 122 cars that could stream out of the one proposed access will significantly add to the road congestion, chaos and closures which Swindon Village is currently facing thanks to poor management from GCC. Yet instead of improving the local road network, GCC suggests funding is given to Junction 10 improvements to make this acceptable. It's like a doctor giving the wrong cure to the wrong patient. The officers quite rightly highlight that this funding requirement is ludicrous, but the report still takes the bait and misses the real issue, which is that it focuses on the problems with funding Junction 10, while still not addressing the clear indication that traffic from the site is going to be detrimental, let alone suggesting that this funding is directed to the local road network instead. The traffic and road chaos will pose a significant risk to resident safety, as Flo has highlighted, and to community amenity, which goes against Cheltenham Plan paragraph 14.4. It is again a shame to see that the report does not address traffic when this is clearly stated as one of the contributing factors for community immunity in that paragraph. The pollution caused by this traffic will cause serious harm as well. The report underestimates the current amount of nitrogen dioxide because the impact of future standstill traffic is not considered. The report conditions an air quality assessment, and while it asks that any effects be mitigated following the assessment, the amount of nitrogen dioxide this traffic will inevitably produce should be grounds for refusal, not conditioning. The vehicular access is also incredibly poor. It is singular, which is unsuitable for such a large number of houses. Secondly, it fails to consider the roundabout on Swindon Road, which is significantly more suitable and instead opts for going straight onto Swindon Road in between Elm and Waterloo Streets. These two streets are unable to handle two-way traffic at the best of times and will inevitably be used as wrap runs onto Tewkesbury Road. A substantial number of accidents also occur around Swindon Road and Elm Street because of the traffic and narrowness of the road, as Flo has highlighted, and I can attest from personal experience. Until the County Council acts to put a TRO in place for these streets, the access proposed in this area is unsafe. The design is noted, but ultimately the scheme is the wrong way round. Why have houses by the animal shelter when this could instead be used for the park and/or wildlife conservation, as proposed in the south of the site? It's a poor and ineffective use of the land. A proper scheme could come forward that attenuates for the need to balance development and the environment, which proposes proper highways access and seeks to invest in upgrading the Swindon Road Bridge to avoid pollution and dangers to wildlife/people. The best site would follow our joint core strategy and the NPPF by delivering a balance of affordable, social and market-priced housing, while also meeting the huge services deficit facing the town, which will only be exacerbated by the new developments coming forward. We need more GPs and dentists, libraries and community centres, and community-run businesses in this area. More than that, the Folly is a green space under the local plan and is an incredible place to enhance wildlife and build a well-integrated community park, not as an afterthought, but as an integral part of the scheme. This, not congested streets and chaotic roads, will help the local community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. And then finally, I'd like to ask County Councillor Bernie Fisher. Bernie, you have, as you know, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I endorse what has been said by previous councillors and I will not repeat it. But let me give you some really hard facts. Junction 10 is key to the building of the future of Cheltenham. Some 7,000 dwellings will be built if Junction 10 is given the go-ahead. It has not been given the go-ahead by the government yet, and there is an 80 million shortfall in the budgeting of it. Now, developers have been asked to contribute to that. 20 million has been promised by an application that will be before this committee, I'm told, by the planning officer dealing with it next month, and that is Elms Park, as Flo has said, for 4,002. Other major developers have refused. If this means that Junction 10 does not go ahead, you will not have a plan for future housing. 4,200 houses will be considered by this planning committee next month. If Junction 10 goes ahead, that will give you more than a 5-year housing land supply. A lot more. There's also the implications of cyber. The 1,000 houses that will come with cyber need the link road connected with Junction 10. The cyber building doesn't, but the houses do. There's also the St Modwin's land, which is Severn Trent to the layman. That will need Junction 10 to be 4-way. Highways have not really been consulted on this. You're not the Highway Authority, GCCR. There's no representative here, and they have objected to it. I would add as well that it says in the report that the 2 applications were refused. Highways rules have changed since then. The highway hasn't changed since then, Swindon Road or the surrounding area, and some 300 dwellings have been built since those refusals in that area within a kilometre. I won't name them all because I haven't got time. But if you pass this tonight, you're sending a message to developers. You don't have to contribute to Junction 10. You can still get your planning permission. And that would be a great folly. Excuse the pun, but it would be real folly. It is not sustainable as it is. The 2 applications that were refused previously were on highways grounds. There's also the point that, excuse me, that there is the Swindon Road Bridge. There is no way of easing the congestion on it because highways won't pay. It needs a footbridge separate. That is not being proposed. So the increase in traffic will compound there. We've also got 320 Swindon Road, which is owned by Cheltenham Borough. It's been had planning permission for 2 years. You haven't brought it forward. Are people really engineering the lack of a 5-year housing land supply? or not providing homes. It seems it might be. The real hub here is telling the message out that you don't have to contribute to the 80 million shortfall because you can still get your planning permission. That is what we're going to say if we accept this tonight. Please refuse this application on highways grounds. And of course, I've taken information from officers at Gloucestershire Highways, the Highway Authority, and they strongly object to this application going through now because it would jeopardise Junction 10, which is key to 7,000 houses in the Cheltenham area in the next 10 to 15 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, speakers. We have 3 representatives from Gloucestershire County Council with us today, so they are more than adequately represented. Okay, so we will now then go to member questions. As I say, we have representatives from GCC, Highways, and Ewan from Cheltenham Homes, as was. So questions about housing and homes and highways will be dealt with by them. Any other will be dealt with by Michelle. So I'll throw it open to member questions, please. Yeah.
The comment was made when we were on Planning View. Give a little bit of back into it. I'm very pleased to see that there is no gas on site and that air source heat pumps are there to all properties. As I understand it, both air source and ground source heat pumps often need some extra heating with it. So that would obviously have to be electric. So I'm rather disappointed that there is no solar PV on any of the properties, albeit I do notice that the vast majority of houses, roofs do face north-south, which is great. I think officers did say when we were on site that we might have the opportunity to push for solar PV, because I do think that would be of a great advantage, and it is the council's policy to ask for such things. So my question is, yes, can we condition or push for solar PV on at least some of the houses?
Thank you, Chair. So after view, I did go back to the applicant's agent to ask if it would be considered, but they are not proposing it at this time. And so this application needs to be determined on its merits. As I said in the introduction, they're sort of pushing for a robust fabric first approach. And so they're achieving those, the 61% against the current building regs without the use of solar power.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. Reading the report, is it the case that should this application be approved, that it would be automatically referred to the Secretary of State? That's my first point. The second question is, in view of what Councillor Fisher was saying, could Highways please clarify whether they are in approval with this application? Because the way I'd read it was providing if adequate improvements are to be made to the network, there would not be an unacceptable cumulative severe impact, and there would be no justifiable grounds on which an objection could be maintained. So that's my second point. Third point is a bit tenuous, but I noticed that the animal shelters objected. It's raised concerns about the proximity of the development and the effect of any fireworks on the animals at the shelter. Is there any condition that we could add to people purchasing the properties to prevent use of fireworks?
Thank you. So Michelle, if you can respond to the referral question and the fireworks, and then I'll ask highways.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so because of the Sport England objection, if members are minded to grant planning permission, it will automatically need to be referred to the Secretary of State. In terms of the fireworks, no, we can't attach a condition. It just simply wouldn't be reasonable or enforceable. And I think it's important to remember there are also already, a number of residential properties around there. So, yeah, it's not something we could look to control.
Thank you. And so highways, essentially, are you in support or are you opposing this application?
Thank you, Chairman. You will have seen from our consultation response, it is no objection, subject to conditions and financial contributions. Now, also, as has been mentioned here within the officer report, we are disappointed to see that officers are not supporting our contribution towards the Junction 10 scheme because you do not believe that we have provided sufficient evidence. I can go into further detail on that if you wish me to. So although our consultation response is no objection subject to conditions and financial contributions, without that contribution, technically it is an objection from highways because we do not believe that the impact on the network will have been adequately mitigated. We have provided evidence to show, in line with your own joint core strategies, INFS, is it 1, 6 and 7, that say that development needs to be assessed in a cumulatively. We have undertaken modelling that takes into account all of the developments and the cumulative impact on the network. In our view, from the housing that has been mentioned here this evening, will be severe, and that is why we are seeking contributions towards Junction 10. I want to make it clear that Junction 10 scheme doesn't just solve queuing issues at Junction 10. The scheme that is being implemented also has significant benefits to the wider network and the network where this development is as well. So it is not just an improvement at Junction 10, it is an improvement on the wider Cheltenham network. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Steinhardt.
Could I just have some clarification as to when the playing fields were last used for any meaningful sport, just so that I can get in my mind how long it's been empty for? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't confirm the last date that the field was used for sports.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford.
Yeah, so on many occasions over the last few decades, I've found myself arguing similarly to Councillor Clucas in favour of retaining sports pitches, which sadly have had a pretty torrid time over that period. So I've got a lot of sympathy with that point of view. But also I've been on this committee for the last 6 months when much of our, I would say good work, I think that's reasonable to say, has been cast asunder at when we reach the planning inspector stages, and the planning inspectors, several planning inspectors now have made it crystal clear that the 5-year land supply trumps just about everything. So I'd welcome the thoughts of the planning team on the balance there between, I feel it is an egregious loss of a playing pitches. But equally, we've got the other side of the argument, which sees us hamstrung in planning terms because of this 5-year supply. So I'd welcome a further thoughts on how the committee should weigh those two up. Thank you.
Yes, so the situation is that the tilted balance is engaged by paragraph 11D, and we have afforded significant weight to both the loss of the playing field, given the objection from Sport England, and also significant weight to the provision of 122 affordable homes. And it is a balancing exercise. In this case, given the proposed use of the site, we feel that that does trump the loss of the playing field. If an alternative use were being proposed, it might well be that the balance fell differently. But in this particular case, we are satisfied that it is a scheme that should be supported.
Can I ask, we've already heard that if we approve this, it will be referred to the Secretary of State. And so that is the Secretary of State, not the Planning Inspectorate. So what would be the situation regarding costs if the Secretary of State disagree with our decision? Would there be a cost situation for that?
Thank you, Chair. No, there would be no cost situation in terms of our referral to the Secretary of State. The way that the process works is that we would send all of the application documents to the Secretary of State, and then they have 21 days to review them from the date of their receipt, not from the date that we send them. And then they can simply enable us to proceed as the committee determined, or they can issue a direction against the council to make a particular decision. But there's no cost implications at all.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, through you, Chair, in response to the member query about when the pitch was used last, just in the report at page 26, references made to rugby pitches. This is from the what was incorporated in the Sports England letter. The last pitch was marked in 2019, and then at page, I believe it's 59, there's also reference to last use in 2006, I believe, for cricket. That's from Sports England. Thank you, Chair.
I think, to be fair, it has been used more recently than that football. The Captain Rovers, I remember watching my son play there, but it was five years ago. Councillor Bamford, I think you signalled, then Councillor Clark.
Yeah, just really supplementary to your question, Councillor Baker. If we turn this application down and the applicants go to appeal that decision, presumably that goes to the planning inspector, and at that stage we would be subject to costs if we lost that debate at the planning inspectorate.
Only if they considered our decision to be unreasonable, but I'll let Chris confirm that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The council would only be liable for costs if we were judged to have acted unreasonably and that unreasonable behaviour had led to unnecessary expense by the appellant. So that wouldn't, it's not automatic that there would be costs awarded against the council.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, I would like to ask the officer, please, if you could break down for us the proposed use of the housing, because affordable housing, as we know on the planning committee, is a kind of nebulous term, because I've often said my kids can't afford it. So I know that this scheme includes some social housing. So if you could please, for the sake of people watching, explain how much of the housing is social.
Sorry, Michelle. Oh. Thank you. Thank you, Ewan. Sorry.
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor Clark. So basically, the short answer is we've got obviously 122 affordable homes in total. That's in line with the government definition as per the National Planning Policy Framework. Now, 53 of those homes, so that's 43%, are social rent. So social rent, in essence, is calculated by a government formula, but generally, in layman's terms, those are homes provided at, say, 45% to 55%, give or take, of open market rent. So, for ease of reference, if open market rent is £100 a week, then the social rented homes would be let between £45 and £55 per week. The remaining 69 homes, so that's 57%, will be provided as shared ownership. So that is where you buy a equity share in your home and then you pay a rent on the remaining share to the housing association, in this case, Astor. That product works in helping buyers on lower incomes onto the housing ladder, because instead of buying the full price of your home, so if your home costs, for example, the average price of a home in Cheltenham, £320,000, you could purchase, say, a 25% share in that home or a 40% share in that home, and then you would pay a rent on the remainder. So instead of having and let's say, again, just for ease of reference, that share is worth £100,000, well, your deposit can now only be £10,000, whereas on the open market, you'd have to put down a £32,000 deposit in order to buy that home. So shared ownership is really excellent for helping getting people on the housing ladder. So hopefully that provides a little bit more assurance in terms of the homes that have been delivered on this site. Thanks.
If I can just pick up on that point, Ewan. So we have a housing waiting list of nearly 2,600 in Cheltenham. Do you have an idea, a feel for how many of those are families? And secondly, would both the schemes you've outlined, the part ownership, part rent, and social housing, would both those schemes be suitable for the people on our waiting list? And finally, would absolute priority be given to people on our waiting list, to all 122 homes, if they were passed?
My memory's terrible, so I'll come back on your other questions. But in terms of your first question, you were asking about whether there were, do we have a sort of understanding of how many families are on the housing waiting list? Well, just for reference then, so as mentioned previously, we've got 2,593 households on our housing register in total as of March 2025. There are 631 households in two-bedroom need, so that's going to be a family of sorts. There are 394 households in three-bedroom need. There are 116 households in four-bedroom need. And there are 26 households in five-bedroom need. Then there are 3 households in six-bedroom need. So in total, you're talking about something like in the ballpark of 1,900 households are families, basically, of those households. Actually, correction, about 2,170 are 1,170 rather are families of out of our waiting list. Just remind me, if you would, what your second question was. Apologies.
Yeah, so can you just confirm that for the people we're talking about on that waiting list, both types of housing proposed on this scheme would be applicable for those people, and that absolute priority will be given to our waiting list for these 122 houses?
So just to be clear then, for the social rented properties that I've mentioned, so those 53, those will go to people on our housing register. So those are the rented properties that people on low incomes can afford. Now, there's nothing to stop households on our housing register from securing a shared ownership home. However, the finances involved may well be too great in terms of the long-term costs. Both, obviously, there's a question of deposit and there's a question of the ongoing costs of a shared ownership home. So that may well not be suitable for all of those households, but without having a specific breakdown pretty much of every household circumstance, it's very difficult to say definitively how many of those would or wouldn't benefit from a shared ownership home. Needless to say, there is a wider, large need, as we've sort of touched upon in terms of the house prices being quite high here, private rent being quite high and increasing here as well, and a comparative lack of affordable home ownership options of any kind. So I would say there is a wider market for that, and indeed our local housing needs assessment, which we use as a starting point for establishing affordable housing need, identifies that we should deliver as a minimum 2,364 new affordable home ownership homes between 2021 and 2041. So clearly, you know, that's a big number, but this will make a significant contribution towards that goal. The final question I believe you asked was in terms of whether households with a local connection, local people, local residents for Cheltenham would benefit from the homes. So it's probably just important to note here it's a little bit more complicated than a normal scheme because it's delivered as 100% affordable housing. What that means in very, very basic terms is that 40% of the housing is secure through 106, as the planning officer has noted in her report. So those homes will definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, be provided for local people, whether they're shared ownership or whether they're social rent, irrespective. For the social rent, what we will negotiate in the 106 agreement is that 100% of nominations on the first let of these properties, we as the council get to choose who is nominated. So then we can look to nominate it to people in the greatest need with the fewest housing options, in line with our home seeker policy. And then going forward for every subsequent let, what we would do is we would seek 75% of all subsequent lets to be nominated by ourselves, the council, with the remaining 25% being let through ASTA. Now, in terms of the shared ownership, again, on the 106, those ones, they would go to people with local connection to Cheltenham. Again, local connection being defined in line with our Home Seeker Plus policy. Then we're talking about the 60%. So that's the homes that are above and beyond the 106. So ASTA doesn't have to deliver that. And essentially, Homes England, who provide the grant funding to enable this scheme to happen, subject to it being consented, of course, they don't want any conditions on that grant funding that might restrict either ASTA or themselves inserting the funding into the scheme. So what we would do there is the households, whether it's in terms of social rent, you would still have households benefiting in terms of our local residents through Home Seeker Plus, but you would have to do it in a slightly different way. You couldn't tie that legally into the Section 106 agreement. Homes England won't accept that. You would have to have a separate nominations agreement agreed on a good faith agreement with ASTA. We've done this before, and this is fairly common practice, in order to secure exactly the same nomination rights. And we've already started those preliminary discussions with ASTA in order to see that that happens. Now, in terms of the shared ownership, essentially, Homes England do not place a local connection on shared ownership homes that they grant fund. So what that means in practice is that anyone with any sort of, well, anyone who qualifies for the shared ownership criteria, in other words, broadly, they earn less than £80,000 per year as a household, can try and buy one of those homes. That doesn't necessarily mean that local people won't benefit, because they're equally entitled to go for one of those homes as someone who lives outside the borough. It's just that there isn't a restrictive local connection on those homes. And Homes England do that because they don't want homes sitting empty that the housing association can't sell. So they want to open it up to as many people as possible through their grant funding. And because they're providing that grant funding, they have the ability to do that. So I appreciate that's not exactly straightforward, but that's sort of how that would operate in practice. So in other words, we will do everything we can to ensure that as many homes as possible are allocated, sold for the benefit of local people. Thanks.
I'm really grateful for your attendance today. I'm assuming that the good faith agreement can't be incorporated as a condition. That's the first question. And secondly, are you quite confident that that will be agreed, just in your own gut feel?
So in terms of the good faith agreement and a condition, in my view, that would be no, the answer to that. Again, because what you're doing there is you're almost conditioning the grant, and Homes England are very clear that they offer their grant on their terms in line with a document called the Capital Funding Guide. And that means that you can't sort of go, well, we want all of these limitations on these homes, because Homes England say, no, it's our funding, we're giving it to you on these conditions. So as far as I understand it, you wouldn't be able to condition that without impacting the ability of Asda to access the grant funding and therefore potentially stopping them from delivering the scheme. Sorry, I can't recall your second question that you asked.
It was your gut feel about the progress of the good faith agreement.
I see no reason why Asda wouldn't agree to that personally. They are one of our preferred housing providers that we work with across the borough. This is obviously one of their first schemes they're doing in Cheltenham. And they also have a mission, just like we do, to meet local housing need. The tenant satisfaction measures as well that have recently come out talk about housing associations working with local authorities to help meet our housing needs and to help reduce homelessness and rough sleeping. Now, again, giving us the choice to allocate to people in the greatest need helps us with all of those objectives. So in my mind, we're all reasonable, I'd like to think. And I don't see any real reason why we can't come to an agreement on that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other members with questions? Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, it was going back to the highways objection, for funding for Junction 10. I know Junction 10's been a big concern of mine since before I was on the council, so well over 20 years ago now. And when we finally got the consultation and Highways said they'd chosen their preferred option, I thought, great, this is going to happen. And the government pulled the rug from under us and it didn't. So if there's a way of getting at least some funding towards Junction 10, can we, at the moment it's not there, but can we condition that tonight?
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's the view of CBC officers that it hasn't been demonstrated that there's a strong enough link between the impact of the traffic movements from the Folly development and the works that are required to Junction 10, the upgrade works, and the financial contribution that's being requested towards them. In terms of what the committee can do tonight, it is within the gift of committee to go down that road, but it's the strong view of officers supported by legal advice that the tests that are set out in the NPPF and in Regulation 122 of the SIL regs haven't been met in this case.
Thank you. It's a really important application, this, so I just want to make sure every member has got everything they want to ask, got the answers they want before we go into debate. Yeah. Well, thank you, Gloucestershire Highways, and thank you, Ewan, for your attendance. So we'll now go into debate. Who would like to kick off? We'll go straight to the vote then, shall we? Councillor Clark, then Councillor Oliver.
I'm really sorry about the green space being jeopardised. I have stood here and spoken against previous applications that would be on AONB land. I've defended green spaces in my own ward. But I want to say, what happens to the bloke who's brought up, doesn't have a lot of money, meets a really lovely woman? He might be, I don't know, manager of Sainsbury's, she's a hairdresser. Where are they going to live? This is a national problem. People deserve a good life. They deserve a roof over their heads, food, education. The school next to this site is undersubscribed. That would provide places for any children that might live there. Can we grasp another thorny problem? Could we not say fewer cars? Couldn't we say we don't want more cars and use that as a campaign? And the social advance of having a safe home is something I'm passionate about. And as for Junction 10, yes, I agree. I don't think this scheme should be asked to contribute to it, because the 4,000 houses which may be built, that's for them to contribute. It's a much bigger development without these social provision or shared ownership. That's crucial. This is 122 houses that will help those people who might not have, you know, a very well-paid job and a big education. This is my family you're talking about here. You know, I come from a working class background, and I feel this country is in the grip of greed to achieve more money through investment in housing, and we need to stop it. We need to provide more social housing. Nobody wants it next to them, I understand. I really understand that you want to keep the folly. But where are we going to go? There's no land available. There's no money. There is no money. 74% of Cheltenham council tax goes to GCC. Excuse me, you pay for it. National government, you pay for it. This one and the previous one. That's not really not a political statement. It's about there's so much money, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lack of security for the poorest. We have poor people in Cheltenham. We just happen to gloss over it very well because we happen to be lucky and live in a beautiful town. But there is no money around. There isn't security. That kid that grows up that just happens not to be very bright. I have 3 kids. They're not all the same at all. And I just feel we have to consider where we're going to put social housing. There's no land in Cheltenham. I have fought to defend the cricket club because somebody was trying to get hold of that land to build on. So I'm torn. I agree with Councillor Bamford. Normally, I would fight to defend any green space. I love nature. But I do feel I wanted to make a statement about the national problem of a lack of social housing, because with the housing comes security, comes less violence, comes a chance at maybe a better education because you're feeling better about yourself, and better health, better mental health. There is a doctor's surgery planned for this site, by the way. That seems to have been overlooked by some of the objectors. There is a doctor's surgery, a new one, that will be paid for by the developer. So I'm asking you to think of the people who might be lucky enough to live there. Thank you.
I don't think there is a doctor's surgery for this site, but there is a doctor's surgery. Is that correct?
It's a community centre. Is it not a community hall? No, I beg your pardon. Elms Park. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I understand local concerns, but to turn this down, we need to demonstrate that the harms outweigh the benefits. What have we got here? We've got an unused green space. We can't make the university use it as a playing field. So do we let it lie dormant? What use is it to local people? Well, yes, it's the use is it's a great place to look at. But under planning law, people are entitled to light. They're not entitled to a view. Part of this development will open up an element of the green space, which will be able to be used by the public generally. It's going to provide 122 affordable homes. It's going to provide a car park for the school, which is desperately needed. And I can't honestly say that the benefits don't outweigh the disadvantages.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor Williams, and then Councillor Andrews. Thank you all.
Yes, I do know this site quite well. The map you showed of the site, the house I used to live in, is just off the edge of the map, just behind the animal shelter. My children used to go to the infant school there. They didn't go to the juniors. We moved just before then. But, you know, I didn't really recognise the folly because it was behind a hedge. My children didn't have access to it because it was college. So, yes, it is a playing field and it is a loss. I accept that. But when I first saw the proposal, my feeling was, but this is already a relatively high density area. If they're going to build on that, I want to see a significant amount of green space, not simply a few grass verges and a kiddie's play area. I look at the drawing that's there and we have got a little bit more than a grass verge and a kiddie's play area. There is a park, yes, I think we can call it a park there, that is going to be accessible by the community in general there. The houses themselves, I am rather disappointed. They haven't fitted at least some solar PV. But one of the arguments I have put for a long time is when we've got a large development, please, if you're not going to put solar PV on, at least make the roofs suitable for retrofitting of solar PV. And for the most part, other than an odd few houses, these are just that. So whereas I would like to insist that a decent proportion of them did have solar PV, I think I'm moving my personal goalposts because, you know, they are suitable for retrofitting. And I think areas such as the animal shelter, which I've got a lot of time for, there is a big area at the back there that screen them from the housing, more screening from the houses in, I'm just trying to think of the area to the northwest, the road to the northwest. No, not Windy Ridge, the one, if you go past, just before you get there, there is more screening going in there. I think on balance, the need for homes will outweigh the loss of a play pitch. or even visible green space. I think the visible green space is actually going to be more than was there before. So, yes, I'm inclined to be happy to go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I think the Stanwick Gardens is... Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the traffic problems, and anybody who thinks that the 122 cars, if they had one each, wouldn't make much difference, they'd not seen what happened with Marks and Spencer's over the weekend. It's absolutely crazy the amount of traffic on Tewkesbury Road and Princess Elizabeth Way. People just could not move. It was absolutely bonkers. So I don't like that idea because of that. The animal shelter itself, next year it's celebrating its 100th anniversary, and then we're going to sort of build right on their doorstep, and the animals are going to be going doolally. I know a lot of them don't give the monkeys, but a lot of them do, and it's going to be awkward. That Gardens Lane is going to be an absolute nightmare for people accessing the animal shelter. And so what I said there. Yeah, it's a lovely plan, but it's just in the wrong place. So I won't be voting for it. Thank you.
Just on that, Gardens Lane will not be used by this development. Okay. Councillor Andrews, I think, next.
Yep, got there eventually. Yes, on balance, and there are evidently some issues with this, certainly as regards with the roads, but harking back to what Councillor Clarkin has said, we are in desperate need of that social housing. For anyone on those social housing lists, there isn't a 5-year housing supply problem. There's a 0-year housing supply problem. They need them now. It's slap bang next to a primary school, so it's a great place for families to be. I do note from the plan, obviously it does open up more green space to the public. It presently is just fenced off, mowed lawn. So with the addition of the planting and the trees, etc., there's opportunity for an increased biodiversity within the area, especially as it flows through Elmfield onto the Honeybourne line. On balance, it has its problems, but I think the benefits outweigh the negatives.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to prolong the debate. I couldn't agree more with Councillors Oliver and Clark. I won't reiterate the points they made. I think I will be voting to support the development. Just one further point to note: the changing facilities are now dilapidated, so any scheme to try and resurrect these playing fields would have a difficult problem to address there. One final thing from me, though, I do think there is a strong point that the highways officers have made here, that it is a dangerous precedent to allow this development without some contribution. I accept it's not a significant, it's not a hugely material issue, but to actually say to these developers that they needn't contribute at all, I think is personally a mistake. I would rather we were asking for some sort of contribution. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to say a few things. One of the main policies, strategies of Cheltenham Borough Council is the delivery of affordable homes. That is one of our 5 main strategic aims. It would be crazy to me for us not to support a scheme which does exactly what we want our town to be doing. Since the new government was elected, they have made it absolutely clear about the importance of delivering housing and delivering affordable housing, and made changes to the NPPF to reflect that. And undoubtedly, if we turn this down and it went to appeal, the planning inspector would have to be of serious consideration to that government policy. I think it's a great scheme, and I think once it is developed, and hopefully it will, be a real amenity benefit for not just the people who will be buying these houses and renting these houses, but for the whole community. Lovely open space with play areas and everything, right in the heart of residential area. Absolutely fabulous. I don't think we can understate the importance of that. We talk about financial contributions. The trouble with this is that if we start demanding this highway contribution, that will, in my view, really jeopardise the viability of the scheme and mean we lose all that affordable housing. You can't have everything. There's only so much money in the pot. So I should be absolutely supporting this. 122 homes, how many families can we help with that? And as so many members have mentioned that, and to me that outweighs the loss of one or even two football pitches. And you know how much I love football. For me, I'm comfortable with the fact that if we pass this, it will in any event go to the Secretary of State, who will obviously be mindful of the playing field situation. And if he decides, then so be it. That's beyond our control. But I want to do the very best for the residents of Cheltenham and for the people on our housing list. And for me, I'll be supporting this scheme. So, before anybody else like to speak before we go to the vote? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, just through you, just to confirm the legal position regarding the contribution. Thank you, Chair. So, as referred to by my colleagues, the legal test is set out in regulation for what, in order for members to be able to lawfully empower that contribution. And that's set out in the 2010 regulations and reaffirmed in the NPPF. And essentially, it is for the planning authority, the highway authority, sorry, to evidence that that it demonstrates the necessity, the direct relationship and the proportionality, essentially, between this application and the contribution. And the point from this council's professional advice is that they have not done so, and hence there is no, that test hasn't been met for you to grant the contribution. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Andrew, did you want to speak?
Yes, I just as an aside, in the social homes necessities that there are within this town, in my ward, I'm quite used to seeing tents in the high street. Minster Gardens had a couple for a while. I've seen them in Winston Churchill Memorial Gardens. I don't want to see that. And I would also like to point out that there are certain parts of this town with fields where this, Charlton Park would be an example, you might not like me to bring that one up, that aren't pulling their weight when it comes to social housing. And there are parts of this town where this would also have been much appreciated.
I'm sure that's true, but that's not really part of this planning application. So we've all spoken. Thank you all for your contributions. The recommendation is to permit, if we can have the voting put up. Is that everybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. That's carried then. So 7 in favour and 1 against. So that application is permitted, and I assume now it will follow its way to the Secretary of State. There we go. Okay, so I'd just like to say thank you to Michelle, actually, for all the work that's gone into this application and your presentation today. Thank you. So we now move on to, where are we? Item 7, which is the appeals update, which is just for noting. And then item 8, no other matters that the chairman considers require a decision. So with no further ado, I'll declare the meeting closed.